Well, it's been 12 days since that sad and gruesome killing of rice farmers in Borno State. And ever since that time, so much has happened at various levels. I mean, we've had meetings with governors, meetings with the president's deliberations at the National Assembly, all in a bit to just try to figure out this whole security conundrum. How do we get out of this? What have we been doing wrong? And what can we do right? Well, we're counting down to the president's appearance at the National Assembly. Well, he has promised to appear, but of course, there's still a lot of uncertainty around it. So we'll be focusing on that in this second part of the program, and joining us on the program to take a look at some of the issues that have come up politically, security-wise, and constitutionally. We have Mr. David Otto, an international defense and counterterrorism specialist. He joins us via Zoom from London. And Mr. Monday Obani is a legal practitioner joining us also via Zoom from Lagos Island. Gentlemen, good morning. Well, Mr. Obani, let me begin with you because, I mean, there are a lot of constitutional issues around the president's appearance. And, I mean, that's, if you look at the front pages of the dailies, that's what you will find. So let's start from that point, especially the AGF statement about the president's appearance or the House of Representatives summon. And he says that as a commander-in-chief, the president has exclusivity on security and has confidentiality over security. These powers and rights he does not share. So by summoning the president on national security operational matters, the House of Representatives operated outside constitutional bounds. Do you agree with the AGF?
Well, thank you for having me. I do not share the same sentiment with the Honorable Attorney General as to the issue of the president not being invited by the members of the National Assembly. I don't think that the word security has acquired a magic wand. When used, scares away people. If you look at the section of the Constitution that he was referring to, was talking about Section 218 of the 1999 Constitution as amended. There is no doubt about the fact that the president determines the operational issue of the usage of the armed forces of this country. That is not in contention. That section never said that in determining the operational use of the armed forces, that the National Assembly members cannot invite the president, especially if you look into Section 88 and Section 89, which is a combined effect that gives them the power to carry out what we call oversight function. In any matter today, as I speak to you, where the National Assembly has what we call legislative competence, any matter they have legislative competence on, they have a right to invite any person and then even cause an inquiry or investigation to be carried out into such a matter of national importance. If you remember, as you recalled, the killing that took place in Borno State, where 43, where the surgeons are even contradicting the figures and saying that they killed more, happened, and there was a national outrage. And people felt, what is going on? With the amount of money that has been budgeted for security in this country, why our lives not secured? Why our property is not secured in the country? And there was a resolution passed by the House, both Senate and that of the House of Reps. Independently, the House of Reps said, look, they want the president to come and explain what is actually going on with the usage of the fund, the issue of security, and some other issues in order to clarify the position whether he is effectively policing Nigerian state. So there is nothing wrong. It's a constitutional issue. And the president is under legal and moral obligation to honor that invitation.
Okay, Mr. Obani, thank you for that premise. We'll build on it, but before then, we'll have to go on this break and we'll get Mr. Otto's initial statements before we explore this topic even further. Gentlemen, please stay with us. You're welcome back. Now, Mr. Otto, you have done some extensive research into terrorism, Boko Haram, ISWAP, and the rest. So you have an understanding really about the operation. So just before we talk about the president's planned appearance and the uncertainties surrounding it, let's talk about that killing, that gruesome killing in Koshebe village. I mean, there's been a lot of reaction to it, which is why we're having, this conversation in the first place. So if we could go back to that killing, really, what is your response to it? When you saw that, what did you decipher from it?
Thank you very much. Of course, the first reaction is sympathy to the bereaved ones, but also to the victims. Condolences to them, gruesome as it may. What we see here, if you want to go into the Zabamari massacre and you look at it from a context of the current insurgency, what you find out is that this was a reactive attack, which was carried out by the faction of Abubakar Shekau. That's what he's claimed. Of course, as you rightly mentioned, there are two main factions that operate within those areas. That's the Abubakar Shekau faction and the Islamic State of West Africa faction. So it's one of those attacks which was carried out as a result of the battle to win hearts and minds. This community, the Zabamari community, has been very much engaged with seeing something, say something strategy, which is to give information to the Nigerian security when they see any suspicious activities of Boko Haram members. And that is what is expected of each and every Nigerian, because, of course, the whole strategy is that, the army or the security agencies cannot win this war without information coming from the local communities. Now, the issue is how protected are these communities when they give out such vital information. And that is where the battle lines have been drawn between the Boko Haram factions that operate in very remote areas and the Nigerian security architecture. Of course, these are very vast areas. I mean, these communities are located in areas where it takes hours for any kind of a reactive force to get to these locations. But what we are looking at now is the ability of law enforcement, but also of local authority, to be able to reinstate itself in parts of northern Borno and Borno in general. Remember that Borno has been under a state of emergency since 2013, when it was declared by ex-President Goodluck Jonathan. So it's at a state of war, but the decision of the governor, Professor Zulum, to have the elections which have recently taken place for the first time since 2007, for the past 13 years, has given Boko Haram, some kind of a punch in the face, because what Boko Haram relies on for these past years is an ungoverned space. So the attack on the Zabamari community is a reaction to these factors, one of which being the recent election, which was successfully held. Boko Haram sees that as haram and believes that the communities that took part in these elections, are against the Boko Haram's, propaganda of, continuously taking control of these territories, when indeed, they have presence, and they use this presence to launch these attacks spontaneously when the security forces are looking the other way.
So based on this premise now, I was reading a particular interview you had with Miro Adeoye, and you said there that you don't discuss the places you have been to, invited to, or not been, unless that this is relevant to a greater good for an existing but confidential peace plan. So it would seem when it comes to issues regarding terrorism and all, you're quite conservative. Now, let's talk about the president's planned appearance. I'm sure you've been following the conversation. Do you think the president should appear before the National Assembly or not?
I think, Nigeria is at a state of war. I mean, especially in the Borno state. And I don't see any reason why the president shouldn't show up at the National Assembly to discuss issues of that great relevance, of national security for that matter. I don't think it's a matter of constitutional correctness. I think it's a matter of national security. And in times of war, the extraordinary steps are taken by the commander-in-chief, whose responsibility is primary. Again, of course, the current massacre, it's something which, it's just one massacre of many that, have happened since 2009. And I believe that any, kind of, summons, or what they call it, for the president to have these discussions and come up with a strategic plan that will direct the operations on ground is extremely relevant. And I don't think it should be questioned, on the basis of constitutional correctness. So I agree that, yes, the president should indeed, be talking to the members of the National Assembly.
So, gentlemen, I think you're on the same page regarding the president's appearance and the Constitution. So, Mr. Obani, I mean, you've seen the uncertainty which the AGF statement caused, because we had the president's aide on social media saying the president will be attending, gave a date. We had the Speaker of the House of Representatives after the meeting with the president saying, well, the president is concerned about security and he has given me his word. He even said that the Senate president was a witness. So what do you make of this conflicting, statements? You have the APC governors also said to be prevailing on the president not to appear before the House of Reps. What do you make of this back and forth, really?
It's clearly embarrassing. I remember vividly, I think a day after the resolution was passed by the members of the House of Representatives, the Right Honorable Speaker, Gbajabiamila, paid a visit to Aso Villa, and he came out smiling, giving an impression that he met a father and a Democrat. And I remember, describing the president in such, swelling a manner, giving an impression that this is a president that listens to a Democrat and that he's going to honor that invitation at a date and time to be agreed upon. Then the aide to the president, I think 2 or 3 days later, on her tweet, verified tweet, also confirmed the fact that the president is going to address the joint house of the National Assembly. And that, of course, gave some of us the impression that really the president is really a Democrat and somebody that is interested in giving and finding a solution to the security issue and challenge in this country, and he will be able to address Nigerians, the true representatives of the people. And so until the governors of APC and some of the APC stakeholders, came to the president and started dissuading the president that he should not order that invitation. I understand that their fear, especially that those of the governors, that they won't want a situation where such will be replicated in the State House of Assembly, where they will be invited to give account to some of their stewardship. So they now dissuaded the president. And then the next thing we heard was the Attorney General, who was now trying to find a legal meaning to dishonoring that invitation. But he made a mess of the entire explanation because he could not pinpoint any provision of the Constitution. Because I looked at his speech. What section is he referring to? And I have said it here. He was referring to Section 218. Is anyone quarreling with the fact that the president is the one that controls the use of the armed forces? He's the one that determines the operational use. Fine. The Constitution says in determining that operational use, he cannot in any way be invited by the House to give answer to certain issues that has to do with the national policy or security. So I didn't know where he's coming from, honestly, because I look at his words and I was looking at him to show any particular section of the Constitution that expressly said that the president of this country under democracy cannot answer to the National Assembly members on issue that has to do with a matter they have legislative competence. I didn't see any. So to me, it is more of politics. It is more of politics. It is more of the APC governors who do not want a situation where they will be held accountable in their various states. Try now to persuade the president that has already built a reputation for himself, who has even given the impression that he will honor the invitation. So why would the president now, all of a sudden, in any case, it's important we also note that the president has not officially declined that invitation, because the members of the House yesterday, stated it expressly that they have not received any contrary opinion that the president will not honor that invitation until the express word comes from the presidency. I think that the president
Mr.
should give
Obani,
himself
one of the
a good
arguments that
image.
a number of
Yes.
people, just one moment, one of the arguments
Yes.
some other observers may put forward is that, look, in the 200 years or thereabout of the presidential system of government in the United States of America, which we claim to be copying, there's hardly been any
Yes.
time when the Congress or their own National Assembly summoned the president, so to speak. So perhaps that is a step or a foothold for some people to say, why should the president honor the invitation of the National Assembly? How do you respond to that?
I don't have such a historical antecedent, and so I may not be in a position to contradict you. But the point is that has there been any time the members of the Congress had invited the president and he refused to honor that invitation? That would be the right attitude to it and right question to it. So if there has been an instance where the Congress had invited the president of the United States of America and he fails to and say, look, I am relying on a constitutional provision that gives me that immunity for me now to honor the people by honoring, by coming to answer some of the questions they want to ask. There has not been any instance. We have not cited any, but I cannot in any way contradict you because I don't have any historical facts with regards to that. But I'm saying, based upon Nigerian Constitution,
But
1999,
then
I have given you
historical perspectives. Yes. One moment, Mr. Obani. Historical perspectives here come, to Nigeria. Of course, there is also talk in some circles that it has happened in Nigeria before, that a president has been invited and that they haven't honored the invitation of the National Assembly. So this will not be a first if the president doesn't show up.
I was trying to cite a section of the Constitution that says, to the contrary, that the Nigerian president can be invited by the members of the House. Our Section 88, the combined effect of Section 88 and Section 89 is important to read it. If you want me to read it, that particular section says that the National Assembly has power to cause inquiry, to be on any matter they have legislative competence on, including causing investigation into any matter, any agency, against any person who they have actually enacted a law governing or covering the area that they want to investigate upon. And then Section 89 says, in doing this, in a matter of evidence, they can invite any person. The Constitution was very express as any person. That any person includes the president. So what is not excluded cannot be included. What is included cannot be excluded. So it is important we know that our provision of our Constitution is very unique with regards to the powers of the National Assembly to cause inquiry into any matter they have powers to make laws upon. And as I said earlier, do National Assembly members in this country have power to appropriate fund for security? They do. Do they have power to make any law to correct any defect on security? They do. And as long as they have such powers, then there is no reason why the president cannot. And the president himself has even agreed to honor that invitation. So it is just politics that is being played now by members of the APC by dissuading the president. Now, that is actually the truth.
Just one moment, Mr. Obani. Now, that is a given. Given the fact that, the Attorney General of the Federation, who is the chief law officer in the nation, is making this statement now, according to the Constitution that you have quoted, would the president be demeaning the Constitution or breaking the law in any way if he does not honor the invitation of the National Assembly?
That is the correct situation. If the president dishonors this invitation, I will tell you that it will actually damage a bit of his reputation, and it's not in his interest. The Attorney General has given him a very wrong advice, and I will advise the president, for some of us that love him, that actually stood in the sun and rain in order to ensure his ascendancy to power, that his reputation will remain intact if he does honor this invitation. By going there, he can refuse to answer any question that actually breach any of this issue of protocol on issue of security. He can say, no, I cannot answer this question with regards to this. He can decide not to answer any question that will actually implicate our security protocol. But that the president will say that he has constitutional right not to honor that invitation, we actually, do a very great damage, collateral damage to his reputation, and will not present him as being described as a Democrat and as a father of the nation.
Right. So, Mr. Otto, if we could just preview the president's planned appearance later on today, maybe in the next 1 or 2 hours before the National Assembly. Just what would you expect to hear from the president? What kind of issues would you like him to speak to regarding the security situation?
I think, first of all, let me touch on what my colleague, my co-panelist has talked about in terms of, I think you did mention the comparison with the United States, whether the Congress can oblige the president. And of course, the answer is no. The Congress can invite the president, as we saw in the case when President Donald Trump was invited to give evidence at the Congress, but he turned that down. So there is one thing to invite the president, and it is under the president's discretion whether he should attend or not. But the comparison with Nigeria, it's quite different because America is not in the state of war. Nigeria, especially in the northern part, is in a state of war. Again, as I mentioned, the state of emergency that has been existing for the past 7 years. So, if the Congress, if the House of National House of Assembly is inviting the president to attend, again, it's the law says they can. It doesn't mean that the president is obliged to attend. But in a state of war, there is a moral responsibility, not a legal one, for the president to attend, the summons, especially. Because it talks about national security, and to which the president is the commander-in-chief. So that has to be made very clear in that perspective. Now, what is the president going to talk about? Depends on what the National Assembly wants to ask the president. But of course, the issues of, the stability of the nation. Remember, the president came to power. He won the election on the basis that, he would, get rid of Boko Haram. I watched and I read the Global Terrorism Index for 2019, and it places Nigeria second to the list after Afghanistan in terms of the number of attacks that have been carried out by any terrorist organization in the world. That means Nigeria plays a very strategic role, and the president is at the helm of that. He must be able to give account to the members of the National Assembly, especially because he controls the police and the military. That is at the forefront of tackling this insurgency crisis. And I'm not just talking about the North. I mean, we've seen issues arising in the Middle Belt with the Herder farmer crashes. We've seen an increase in the number of kidnappings, just after the disbandment of SARS, but also before that. So the national security issues in the country are quite, they're accelerating, if I may say. And the president needs to be able to give his account as to how he will be able to deal with these issues, not just from a strategic point of view, but also from an operational perspective, which he doesn't control. So I think the questions would be, I suppose so. I'm just, I don't know what the National Assembly is going to ask him, but, the questions would be, how would you tackle this ongoing insecurity in all the parts of Nigeria, not just the North? And the simple answer, in my opinion, if I were the president, of course, which I'm not, would be to, talk about the role that the military plays in countering terrorism in the North, but also other insecurities all over the country, and to make sure that there is a coordination and collaboration, not just from other sister agencies, but also from the population. But in order to do that, the government needs to ensure, and I'm talking about the state governments here, but also the federal government, they need to ensure that there is enough security, there is enough protection of civilians in such a way that they can contribute towards information and intelligence gathering that will enable the security agencies to deal with the insecurity that is happening in Nigeria.
Latching onto that operational perspective which you brought in, saying that the president does not have control over it, there have been a lot of suggestions, really, from governors to the National Assembly. For example, the governor of Borno State suggested having mercenaries, having more people from Borno State in the Nigerian military. The Senate has suggested the sacking of the service chiefs and some other suggestions really from Nigerians, all about the security situation. So looking at those suggestions, which one of them do you think would affect the operational angle of this fight against insecurity in general?
I think let me talk about the first one first. Of course, that's the idea that the government should bring in, the Borno State government should bring in mercenaries. Mercenaries will only be effective, if they can blend and engage with the national forces. I'm talking about the Nigerian Army and the Nigerian Police Service, and other units that are operational on ground. So if you bring a mercenary from outside, they still need their hands to be held. But the advantage of having a mercenary is that these forces are not corrupted by any sentiments or any political or affiliations, which could impact on their judgments or their operational activity. So by having them, there could be a balance. But also, you've got to look at it from the moral perspective, where the military can believe that bringing in mercenaries is a clear indication that they failed. But an insurgency war is not as simple as the public sees it. It's a very complex war because you have jihadists that can blend very easily with the local population. Now, in terms of the second, premises of whether the service chiefs should be sacked or not, my opinion has always been to look at the gains that the service chiefs have made, as opposed to some of the disadvantages or some of their weaknesses that they've expressed in the operational theater, and ask the question of who are you bringing next, and what are those individuals that you're planning to bring in? What are they doing now? Are they not involved in the theater of war? And if they're involved, what makes you believe that their strategy is going to be different? Of course, people would say to you that it's a matter of leadership. But when a country is at war, each and every top general is involved in the strategy, is involved in the operations. So I don't believe changing the service chiefs, from an operational point of view, will make any difference to the ongoing war. But it's up to the president, to make that decision. I think what should be happening is that we should be having all hands on deck. All security agencies coming up and putting forward their strategic plan in order to defeat the menace of Boko Haram. Changing the chiefs, in my opinion, I think
now, all of that has been part of the conversation. Yeah. Just one moment. All of that has been part of the conversation that's been on in the media space for long enough. The president has said that the members of the security forces have been adequately mobilized and that more infrastructure is coming in for them. That is already out there. He made that advice. He gave that advice to governors to improve on local intelligence. He has also promised a number of things, to fast track, to energize, to strengthen the national security architecture and all of that. What specifically would you be expecting to be new in the address or conversations of the president with the National Assembly? Anything new you're expecting?
I think the only new thing is coordination, communication, and collaboration of service, security service, representatives, whether they be chiefs or other police or military, civil defense forces, the intelligence units. I think there has been a huge, gap between that collaboration, not just internally within Nigeria itself, but neighboring states, that surround Nigeria are not doing their bit. And, because of that, there are so many gaps that have been exploited. For example, in the northern part of Nigeria, where Cameroon does what they do best, Niger Republic does what they do best, Nigeria does what it does best. But none of these countries are really genuinely coordinating and collaborating their efforts. So whatever you do within Nigeria, it's not sufficient enough to get rid of Boko Haram, for example, and that applies to all other menaces that Nigeria faces. So I think what the president should be saying to the National Assembly is, look, let us find a way that we can have a robust strategy, within the state and within the working with the federal government, that we can deal with this terrorism and security crisis. It's not a one-man's job, and the military shouldn't be giving people the impression that they can win this war on their own. It doesn't happen. And that is where I blame the military, because they give the impression that they can win this war. But this is a war that should be won and could be won by collaboration and coordination of all other sister agencies.
Right. Now, clearly, Mr. Albani, there is a present challenge, which is insecurity. Well, the National Assembly is trying to play its role by inviting the president to speak on it. But, beyond this, really, what options are available to the National Assembly if they say, well, we really need to go the long haul in ensuring that security is done right? What are the options available?
Well, I think part of the reason why they may have wanted the president to come is to know what are the challenges, because they are the one that is acute. Funds have been made available. All the necessary support has been given to the executive. And over time, we've been hearing that this insurgency has been degraded. And now there is this rising of the banditry in the northwest. And so they need to have factual situation on ground in order to either increase the funding or in the laws they will make. And that is the purpose actually of oversight function. And that is why they needed the president to come and then have a tete-a-tete over this particular issue that has become a problem to us as a nation. Lives have been lost clearly on a daily basis. The entire northern region is clearly under stress. So he needed to be there in order to give them that insight. So if the president fails or neglects to be there, I think that other methods they can also use in order to ensure that the Nigerian state is properly policed. They may go through issue of maybe extra budgeting, if it is issue of money. As I said earlier, the president being there would have actually given them an opportunity to know what are the challenges that are on ground. Because over time, the president has given this impression that he has provided all that is needed to be provided, and the men on ground will also do the thing they're supposed to do. Now, remember that they have passed several resolutions asking the president to remove the service chiefs, and up to now, the president has not done that. So that is part of the question they will ask. So if these people have not been removed, and you have refused to remove them, what are the things you are going to do in order to correct all the mistakes that have been made over time in securing Nigeria?
Well, we're all counting down to that planned appearance by the president before the National Assembly. But gentlemen, I'd like to thank you so much for your time on the program, Mr. David Otto, as well as Mr. Monday Albani. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.